pretty excited about it.
I see your dog.
Oh. Hey, there we go. Yeah, there are a couple dogs in here actually.
Good. I've got one wandering around too. Hi, Victor. Hi, Sue. Not yet.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, doing good. Beautiful day.
Yes, it is. You get outside.
We had a long walk. It's really interesting up on Summit here that there's a big operation underway to take a loader and get all the snowplow out of the area between the road and the sidewalks.
Yeah.
So they're making these massive piles in the middle of the road, and then they come with a dump truck and get rid of it.
Yeah, it's quite an operation. I mean, in this winter, we hardly have any snow by usual standards. So when we get a heavy snow winter, it's amazing how much snow the city stockpiles for its summertime use, right, Victor?
Oh, definitely.
Hi, Karen.
Hello, Dana. How are you?
Good. How are you? I was just talking to a friend from Naperville, and they have had maybe more snow than we have had. They've got, I think she said, 2 feet on the ground right now. All the fire hydrants are buried. They're doing nothing to uncover them. And I'm so thankful for City of Harbor Springs DPW, Victor.
Have they been doing a good job?
Yes, it is beautiful. I mean,
Awesome.
like, yes, the attention to detail it's not messy. It just really looks good.
Yeah, I was just in Ann Arbor yesterday and I could not believe how much snow they had in the ground and how
Yeah.
little they had really cleared off the edges of the road too. There's like no place to park on the side of the road.
Well, I guess we have a really good DPW and maybe we're a little more used to it up here.
Yeah, we're spoiled.
Get my
Yeah,
tea.
snow in the city is just a nuisance. There's just nothing that good about it, but
We need two DPW workers to come out with those fire hoses and melt it. That's not good for the environment, though.
no.
Well, we should get some melt next week as it warms up.
Yeah. Yeah, and these days when it's dry and doesn't snow, it's surprising how much shrinkage it dries and evaporates and just shrinks. Which you notice if you're out skiing in the woods and hoping that the briars will stay covered.
Yeah.
Deeply covered.
Yeah.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, how's
Hey,
it going?
Good. How's your winter going?
It's going.
Ben? Looks like we got Nancy on.
All right, doing double duty here today.
Hey, Nancy.
Hi, how's everybody?
Good.
How are you?
Good, I'm fine, thanks. Fine. You guys are gonna have to watch me eat my lunch, sorry.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that.
What are we having today?
Did you
What are
bring
we
it up
having?
there?
We're having salad, like I do a lot of days.
Sue, you must remember as one of the original tree board members, you guys used to get lunches.
Yep.
I cut that. I got serious.
What?
It tends to cut down on the amount of time that people want to spend actually talking.
Yeah.
I mean, we
true.
shouldn't talk with food in our mouth.
No, meaning if you start with a social, with like a social lunch thing, you'd end up not doing very much.
Really excited about our new tree board. This is good.
Yes, new blood.
I know everybody here except I haven't officially met Susan.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I recognize your name.
And I know
who
your
you
name
are.
too.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. I know Ben. Haven't seen you for a while, Ben.
I've been hiding.
The time of year to hide.
Yeah.
Hey, Becky. I see Becky.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Becky.
Well,
I don't
Sue-
know Becky, I think I know everybody else, but I don't know
Sue
Becky.
as
I'm
acting
Nancy
chair,
Rondell.
or vice chair for now. We'll have you start the meeting and lead the meeting and go from there. And we can do
Okay,
the introductions as well.
we ready to roll?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order and Victor will take a roll, we'll do a roll call.
Yes, I will. So, Dana Mulder. Oh, and please say the location you are, what city you're, that's part of the new Open Meetings Act law is to say where you're zooming in from. So, Dana Mulder,
Here from Harbor Springs.
Karen Strow,
Karen Stroud from Harbor Springs.
Susan Stewart,
Susan Stewart from Harbor Springs.
Becky Roethlisberger, is that how you pronounce it?
It is Becky Roethlisberger, Harbor Springs.
And last but not least, Nancy Rondell,
And I'm here and I'm in Harbor Springs.
just across the street. Looks like we have a corner.
Actually, I'm at Perry Farm because I'm sneaking out for an hour here.
Okay,
So
all right.
not far away, not far away.
Great.
But there are trees up here too.
Forum.
So it's
Okay, next order of business is approval of the minutes of December 18th. Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes?
This is Dan. I just have one minor thing. On page 2, Mulder Stewart recommended the available charts graphics be added. I think that was supposed to be moved to the appendix, which they were. So
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't even need to be addressed.
It doesn't even need to be in there, frankly. I mean,
Any other suggestions?
Looks
Edits?
good. Besides that, I would make a motion that we accept the minutes with that change.
second,
So for the new members, we do a second, so someone makes a motion and then someone has to second, then we call a roll call vote. So even if you weren't here at the previous meeting, your new members, you can still second motions for approving minutes and other things. We have a
okay,
motion
we have a
by,
motion. We have a motion and a second. Victor, do you want to do a roll call vote or do we just do something
I'll do a
simpler?
roll call. We'll have to do a roll call vote through Zoom. So Susan Stewart,
Aye.
Karen Strow,
Yes.
I'll just say your first names, guys, now. Nancy,
yes.
Becky,
Aye.
and Dana.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Looks like Sue, board communications, right? Yeah.
Yeah, are there any board communications we need to consider?
No, I think this might just be a good opportunity to introduce our new members. Thank you for applying, Karen Stroud, Becky. Glad to have you on board. I'm sure if you have any questions at any time about how the board functions, about the technicalities on voting and anything like that, please feel free to email me. You know, we don't have to discuss it here, but just ask me anytime you have a question, just send me an email. There's some specific state laws about, you know, open communications and Open Meetings Act, but those are for our tree board purposes. We usually don't get that heavy into that stuff. So I think you'll probably get the feel of it as we go along, but we're really excited to have both of you on board. And I don't know if this matters or not, but this may be our first completely female board in Harbor Springs.
All
So
right.
that's something for what it's
Yeah,
worth.
yay. Good start.
Yeah, so.
Girl power.
that's-
Victor, does Ben have his hand up?
Does Ben, do you have your hand up? I don't see it. I don't see that he has his hand up.
He has
Okay.
He
his-
just,
I do not have my hand up.
There's a little hand next to his name. That I was just wondering what that was.
oh.
Oh.
Nope, it's not appearing on mine. But so, yeah, that's what I have. I just want to welcome you guys and, or girls, and have fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We don't have anyone who's here as a member of the public. Are there any other public comments that we need to consider?
Not at this time. There's only one person watching on YouTube, and I'll let you know. So our YouTube is a little bit delayed by 15, 20 seconds. So usually we might get public comments that straggle in through there. So if we do get any from the YouTube, I'll just interrupt the conversation at that time. But nope, no comments right now.
Great. Moving on to old business, the 565 Main veg management issue. We don't have the O'Briens with us today. Are we going to consider this or not until they join us?
So yeah, Ann emailed me after I sent the packet out and said that she's going to try to contact Ben just to talk about if trimming is still, what kind of trimming she can do. So we're still putting this one on hold, and I won't include it in the next packet unless she says she wants to be on the agenda. So we'll push that off.
Sounds good. And then what is our next order of business?
E2 is approved tree plan. I have it on the screen if you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
Victor, I'd just like to say that I think the tree plan is outstanding. I think it's really something we can all be proud of, and it'll, as we've said, be a working document. I've got just one small thing under the street tree planting application. I wonder if we now want to reference the trees to plant for success as a reference rather than, I think there were a couple of previous references.
What page are we looking at? What?
That's a good question. It's the application, the street tree planting application. So
that's
that would be under,
in the appendix.
yeah,
appendix.
maybe.
Yeah, okay, so that is something that we'll probably have to edit our forms and that we have.
Yeah, just to
So,
be
yeah.
consistent though.
Yeah, so this one right here. Yep, we'll eventually have to edit our forms. I'm just including the current form that we have, but that's something we'll eventually have to get to. That's a good point, Dana.
Yep, and then just whenever we do get to that point, or we could talk about it now, we should let everybody else talk first, but just a couple of issues with that trees to plant for success document to talk about. But let's hear everybody else's thoughts first.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I want to compliment whoever put all this together. It is really remarkable and really detailed. How long did this take to do? I mean, how did this all come together?
Oh, gosh. We've been working on this probably for 1.5 years now,
Oh, wow.
almost.
All right.
So it was a joint effort. Different board members wrote different sections. I wrote some sections, and it was a team effort.
Yeah, it's really outstanding. I did have a question. One thing that I, kind of being the newbie, one of the newbies on this team here, I wondered, would it be important to include like what trees, I mean, where these trees are located, not one by one, but what is it that we have responsibility for as City of Harbor Springs? We know the parks, but then there's a lot of references to right-of-way, property owners who come and ask permission to trim or whatever. And I really wasn't sure exactly what that meant. And I think maybe that's part of the education, so that I assume it means the distance between the curb and the sidewalk is city property, but it just wasn't really clear to me. So I thought it would be really helpful to define where those, what parts of the city the trees are that we as a city can have responsibility for and govern, basically.
Yeah, a little explanation of what we mean by street trees, which is trees in the city right-of-way adjoining public roads. And I mean, there's probably some technical legal, but Karen's not going to be the only reader who isn't familiar with that concept of these are the trees that the city's responsible for.
Mhm.
Maybe something in the introduction to clarify.
That is
I
a good
think,
point.
with the education plan or the proposal for educating the community, that could be definitely part of it. So, people understand that if the tree is in front of their house, it's not necessarily their tree to trim or cut down or whatever they want to do to it.
Right.
Yep, I will make a note to just have maybe some definition of what street trees and right-of-way trees are, but yeah, it's also could be incorporated in other documents as well in an education campaign. And Ben has compiled with Timberwolf Tree Care, they have an inventory. We have a tree inventory. So, and there's a map that, shows the locations of these. So that'll be helpful, but we just too big of a document to include in our
Mhm.
appendix.
Right.
It might be suggestible to include definitions as part, I mean, like having a glossary or an appendix to the document instead of putting it in the front.
That's a good,
Mhm.
I mean, city ownership, I don't know. I don't think that that's ambiguous. It's trees that the city owns, but understanding all the different sites that the city owns or has responsibility for is very complex and almost as big as the city inventory itself. That could be, I think, a very large, and if we're not.
well, that's a good point, actually. If we have a glossary of certain terms, it can that way be an evolving and document that we don't need to update our tree plan every time we update the glossary of terms. And that way it'll be easier to pass this tree plan and then just reference a glossary in the appendix. First, I can start, like for next, my goal is to take this to council on March 1st, so I can just add a glossary of some common terms right now, and then the tree board can always come back to that glossary and like, we need to define this, we need to find X, Y, or Z, or something like that. And I think that'll be a good, better way of handling it. Good suggestion, Karen and Ben.
Yeah, I thought, I mean, in reading through it, I don't live on Main Street. We don't have a sidewalk in front of our house. But if I lived on Main Street, or even the shop owners on Main Street, and there's a tree that is diseased or branches need to be trimmed or whatever, I would assume it's my tree to do something with, but it's really not my tree, I don't think. So that's what I was not confused by. I just need more education about what things are ours and what things aren't ours. I see, some questions about a property on Lake Street or whatever. Is that part of our responsibility? Obviously, it's not on Main Street, but how far do we go? The parks are pretty clear, Dorrance Park, whatever, Marina Park, whatever trees there are. But what about in front of privately owned homes? So
I think one thing that might help with clarification, Victor, is a lot of people assume that they own to the sidewalk, and that's not at all true, or to the street.
Right.
So,
It varies.
I suppose maybe there is that case, but in our neighborhood, there's probably 8 feet, that's still city property, as well as we do have sidewalks between the city and the sidewalk on the city street.
The difficulty is that we'll find here is that not every road has the same, the city doesn't control the same amount of space on every single road. So for example, some roads we have 50 or 60 feet, some we have 100 feet, some we have less feet, the alleyways, and not everyone has built their homes and their properties in a way that you can tell if there is a sidewalk or not a sidewalk, if what belongs part of the city or not. A lot of trees are on the border zone. So I don't know, we can't get very specific exactly, like, this street is 30 feet. I mean, that's something that we'd take a lot of time. The DPW, of course, has maps. But
right.
A general definition of, in general, most streets are 60 feet the right of way, or something like that. So, yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know that the city needs to define what's theirs and what's not. Ownership of a private lot is defined by the legal description of their property.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, when they buy a property, would have a mortgage survey map, which would indicate what they own. But, I don't have to tell you that it's my car for you to know that stealing it is illegal. Again, I think it would be really a large, it would be a very large document to try to indicate to the general public what is owned and what's not owned by the city.
Well, then maybe we go back to that idea that Dana had to put something in the introduction and not make it a definition, but have it introduce the concept that the city has 2 major areas of responsibility where trees, or responsibility for trees primarily in 2 areas, one being city parks and the other right of ways between the sidewalk and the road, or even not to say that much of it.
Between the property line and the road. Yeah.
Yeah, between the property line and the road. Mm-hmm.
And so, like with Karen, if I can use your property as an example, if I remember correctly, there is no sidewalk,
Right.
but probably a road easement. And so part of your yard may actually be under city ownership.
Yeah.
And so again, that we could define as right of ways or easements that the city owns, and that could be part of the glossary.
I think it's best to put it right up in the introduction though, because people aren't going to go searching a glossary.
I think that if we put something M's in what it may or may not be, someone will make a decision and prune a tree thinking that it may be theirs, or remove a tree thinking that it may be theirs, and they'll cite the document as being permission that was not granted, and that would be what I would be cautious about. Not, I mean, as long as there can be some wiggle room where the city can say, this does not define all cases, and it's the responsibility of the people doing the work to figure out what trees belong to them, I think is important. I don't think people are ill-meaning. I think that it's, in small spaces, property lines can be very hard to discern. And, this isn't like an 80-acre field where the fence row used to be the property line. I think
Ben, that's a good point. And I think I found the spot is under our tree inventory and assessment. We have a tree inventory assessment of street trees and tree located in city parks. And there's a good spot to just say in general, what we mean by street trees and what we mean by trees in city parks, and then have that caveat but there's other, this is not a catch-all of what are street tree or city-owned trees. It's just an example of some. And then that could give us the opportunity, because we related to the assessment and inventory. And then we could still have a glossary of defined terms as well to help people out.
Well, you do have established a process people have to go through to get permission if they think the tree is on their property. Maybe it starts with, look at your deed and make sure that this tree is on your property or is not on your property as is defined by the ownership of your property. I mean, maybe that's part of the process they have to start with.
And if you have a question, please call the city.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm. Good suggestions. Any other thoughts, comments on the tree plan?
Victor, I still just wonder if maybe there's a reference to this section in that first introduction. Like, what if they don't read section 3?
Well, if they don't read section 3 or they don't read any, I mean, what we have to, public should always keep in mind, same thing with the master plan. This is not law. This is not this is a planning tool, a planning document. So some people read the master plan and say, hey, the master plan says I'm allowed to build a building this high, or that this building should be built here. No, that's not, the master plan is just a planning tool. So, I mean, there'd be we can always find a lot of instances where it'd be like, well, what if they skip chapter 7 or chapter 1? What if they skip the introduction? So, I mean, I think we can rely on that. I think we just have to make clear this is a planning document, a planning tool, and that please check the ordinances and for what is the actual current law.
That's a really good point. Yep.
Just so they know, they should not assume that a tree that sits on their property is their tree to do something with. Because
Right.
that's not always really clear to me in reading through this.
Any other thoughts on the tree plan? Questions, comments?
If not, are you looking for a motion to adopt or approve, or what?
Yeah, what I would be looking for is a motion to recommend approval of, because council will be ultimately the one to have to approve it, with these recommended changes of including some sort of definition, an explanation about what are street trees and other city-owned trees, and as well as including a working glossary. And then I don't think we need to bring that back to the tree board. Again, it's something minor that council can just approve. And so that's what I'd be looking for, a motion for that.
Karen, would you like to make your first motion?
Yeah, okay. I so move what Victor just said.
Second.
Second by Stu. I saw Stuart.
I knew who you meant.
I like that as a nickname, though.
I don't know if she does. I mean, All right, so it looks like we have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Becky,
Aye.
Nancy,
Yes.
Nana,
Yes,
Sue,
Yes.
and Karen.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. That was I know
Yay.
the two new members, but that was a lot of work for our tree board, and looking forward to council dealing with it now.
And Victor, a lot of work on your behalf, and your writing skills are really impressive. This is the kind of document that can take a person a really, really long time to finish at this quality. So nicely done.
really nicely done.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you,
Quite
guys.
agree.
Appreciate that. All right, Sue, take it on to the next
New
item.
business. So meeting schedule for 2021. We have held meetings on the third Friday of every month. Do you, with putting that question on the agenda, Victor, did you, okay, recommend that we continue to do so? So I'll open that up for discussion.
Yep, I recommend we continue Fridays at noon, and these are the dates, but if there's a big objection to it, you can have that discussion.
Victor, do we have any of these falling during like a spring break or a holiday weekend or anything?
No, so I looked at it, and because we're on the third Friday, usually the holidays are in the earth. So for some reason, most holidays are at the end of the month or the beginning of the month. July 4th, December 25th, so I didn't see any here. Potentially November, but Thanksgiving was in the 20 something. So I next week after, so none that I saw.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Dan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Karen. Who's
Sue?
that, Sue? Oh, all right.
Doesn't matter.
Second by Sue. All
I
right,
was kind of curious. I mean, there has been enough going on to justify having meetings every month? Those of you
Yes.
who've been doing this for a while. Okay.
Yeah, because it's a mix of current business and kind of planning ahead.
Okay.
And so when we don't have to do a lot of day-to-day stuff, we get a chance to talk about bigger plans or grants to go after or stuff like that.
Okay.
Yep. Historically, this was more of an informal committee back into 2015, 16, and then we formalized it in the last couple of years with more regular meetings. So we have a motion and support. I'll do a roll call. Nancy,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Becky,
Aye.
and Dana.
Yes.
All right, so this meeting schedule is set. We can move on to item F2, election of officers. All right, so Sue was our vice chair. And every January we have to do, or first meeting of the year, have elections for officers. And we have two positions. Other boards have three, like a secretary, but I act as a secretary for this board. So what we'll be doing is seeking nominations for a chair and nominations for a vice chair. And that'll be a year-long position through the end of this year. So I guess we should entertain any nominations first off for the position of chair.
I'd like to nominate Sue.
Second that.
So we have a nomination by Dana and a second by Karen. Is there any discussion on that motion? Any other nominations? No? Okay.
It's fine with me. This is an easy role and this is my final year on the tree board. So it's just fine.
All right. Thank you, Sue. We'll
Oh,
take a
that's
vote.
kind of surprising.
Take a vote. Becky,
Aye.
Karen,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
and Sue.
Yep.
All right, we have our chair. Congratulations, Sue. And nominations now for vice chair.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Nancy.
Is this a 3-year term?
No.
No, the
No,
board
no,
position-
on the tree board.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
It's a,
so Becky and Karen have 3 years and Sue's going off, and then Dana, when does your term expire?
I think I've been on a year, Victor, something like that.
Mhm.
yeah.
So 2
Then-
more years.
Then I'd like to nominate Dana as vice chair.
Second,
I think it's good when the years, they don't both go off is why I was asking at the same time.
That's a good idea. So we have a nomination by
Yeah.
Nancy and a second. Was that by Karen?
yes, it was.
Any discussion on that nomination?
Sounds
Dana,
good.
how do you feel about that?
I'd be glad to do it.
I'm just making sure. It's a heavy burden. It's a heavy role.
Yeah, ooh, the pressure.
All right, I'll take a roll call on that. Becky,
Aye.
Dana,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes,
and Karen.
Yes.
Great. Looks like we have a chair and a vice chair. Congratulations. And I just noticed, sorry, right now that our student representative is not here, and I'll make sure, double check that I sent them an email. I think I did, but anyway, for those 2 new members, we do have high school students that serve as board members, as kind of a liaison between the high school and the youth and our boards. We have on the DDA, the tree board, as well as the planning commission, high school students that serve. And it's just a good way to keep the dialogue between the youth and the board. So I'll double check to see, make sure that wasn't my fault. I'm pretty good at copying them on our emails. So anyway, okay, it might've been my fault. Going on to Sue, item F3, which is our 2021 goals. So at our December meeting, we had planned to talk about establishing some sort of goals for the 2021 year. Of course, we don't want to overwhelm ourselves, but I propose we start with a few goals that have touched on some of the more persistent issues. And I've just included goals that we've talked about historically in the past year and a half. One was obtaining Tree City USA certification. The second was executing and coordinating the Relief Grant tree planting, which we'll talk about that in the next agenda item. Figuring out, establishing the city's true cost to plant and maintain trees, which sounds easy, but is getting convoluted. Determining the city's irrigation watering needs for existing trees and newly planted trees. And I talked with Ben a little bit about that. And that's, not so much about just making sure we have irrigation everywhere, so making sure that are we monitoring how much water trees are getting in? Are we doing a good job of that? And are we overwatering, underwatering? So kind of monitoring that. Creating standards to objectively assess the tree removal request. This had come up a few meetings ago about, we don't have any standards established for how we actually monitor, assess those removal requests. Creating a systematic approach to determine future tree planting locations and assigning responsibility to staff members or board members for goals in the implementation matrix of our tree plan. So those are the ones that stuck out to me that we talked about in the last several months. I propose those as some of our goals, but if other members have anything that's more pressing or they want to get to this year, let's open that for that conversation.
I'd like to add something about education. I'd like to start, and maybe you've already discussed this, but planning a way to start educating the community about what this is about, the importance of it, everything that you outlined in the document initially. I think we should get a start on it this year. That would be my recommendation, to add that.
That's a good point, Karen. So maybe what I can do is go through our education section of our tree plan and start pulling out some of those easier educational goals, tasks.
Yes.
Victor, I had a couple. One, guys, I've done some research and put together a preliminary list of species to be avoided. I think that would be good to start getting that in the works. It's good to know what's good to plant, but also things what to avoid. And then I think another thing that's really important is that we fix the tree bases at the parks. So I was at Shea Park, and it's the same thing that's has already happened on Zoll Street, where the string trimmers are starting to cut into the bark around the base of the trees because grass is growing right up to the tree. So what would be involved in this is either volunteers or the city, somebody first painting out like a 2-foot radius around the tree, digging out the grass and putting mulch in. And, you know, it's one thing that I was thinking about, and I don't know what kind of response we would get. We would likely have some response from the tree board members, but, you know, maybe we would propose this spring some work days where the community, you know, could come, you know, help on projects or something, or, you know, like the Honor Society or kids from the schools. But I think the longer this goes, you know, unaddressed, the more potential damage to the trees.
Ben, what are your thoughts on that? I know Ben has talked to me previously about, and which is a point that I'm going to take into consideration here, is, you know, educating our DPW workers on, you know, making sure they're not, you know, weed whacking the trees and stuff like that. But Ben, what are your specific thoughts on, you know, protecting the tree bases and how to go about that?
Well, and anytime we have soil disturbance at the base of a tree, there's problems we can have. And I don't think it's as simple as we just strip the grass out. I mean, if we're irrigating the site, there's a possibility that the roots are within the grass layer. If we're going to strip out the roots that the tree needs, which is going to be as damaging. If we're having a hard time with DPW staff understanding that string trimmers cause damage to trees, I don't know that the maintenance of mulch would be, it could be equally confusing. You know, and as per, you know, earlier conversation, I think we all need to accept the idea that, you know, sola dosis faceta venitum. It's the dose that makes the poison. Too much water, too much mulch, too much collision with string trimmers are all deadly to plants. All those things can be monitored and used appropriately, and they're very effective tools. If we, I think that our first step should be that we educate the staff, because if we don't, what will end up happening is we'll just find another avenue, you know, through attrition, I guess, that something else will get messed up. And I think there's a disconnect. We don't have a synergy between, you know, what tree board wants and what DPW understands. And so maybe it would make more sense just to have a time to talk with them about what string trimmers do. And I think the simple answer might be that we just put stem protectors on the bases of the trees, a piece of PVC or, you know, a piece of plastic that can be inserted that doesn't change soil grade, doesn't require a whole lot of special labor, and can be maintained and replaced fairly easily.
Which is fine until the tree outgrows that 4-inch diameter size.
But the 4-inch, yeah, I mean, we can go larger, certainly go to bigger pieces. The problem with mulch rings is that the tree is we're going to have to maintain mulch rings. We're going to have to make sure
that is a true statement.
So I guess
I think it's a much nicer finished look. You know, when you think about disturbing the roots don't grow up, they grow down.
That's not true. If we're irrigating the site, what we end up with is hypoxic conditions, and the tree roots do grow up. I mean, the problem is that we then need to extrapolate between the people carrying out the work, the ability to identify what structures they're disturbing. What we're running into right now is that we have personnel that can't identify what they're damaging, and it's not because they're bad people, it's because they're not educated in that manner. If we assign a task where we have critical structures on plants, the people that don't understand critical structures on plants will have the same problem. If we over mulch, we'll have the same problems as if we string trim the stems. And so those things.
And I agree that that's an education item.
Yeah, so maybe here's what we can do is, our goal here is to determine goals and not really to get into specifics at this meeting. So what if we just say, can we agree that a goal, figuring out what we do with the tree bases. This should be a goal for us to figure out this year and add that to a list of goals.
Good idea.
All right, I'll add that.
Victor,
So,
I have one more that I was wondering if we could discuss. And we've talked about maybe seeing if we can have the request for the city to dedicate some funds to our budget for trees.
Would you want a more general goal about figuring out the right mix of taxpayer monies plus outside grant? I mean, somewhere there's a bigger picture to look at there about what
Yeah,
kinds
you're
of
right.
things should the city be funding and what kinds of things should we be getting outside funding to help with?
I think that's a really good point. And I think one thing is coming back to me now that we said in a previous meeting is, well, let's not do anything until the tree plan is approved. And then one other item that I wanted to discuss as a goal is putting together a street tree plan graphic that will help us identify areas where we need more trees, areas where we want a nice boulevard look, that type of thing. And then maybe, you know, when you go to council, you really want to be asking them a specific request and a specific question, not just give us some money, right? So if we have a graphic where we can say, these are areas where we feel like we are lacking in trees and we would like to, you know, support beefing this up. And here are the grants we've looked at. And then, so maybe this is premature actually.
Yeah, you know what? That might come into play after, because actually on our next item on our agenda is having a general discussion on where we want to see more trees. So maybe that will come as a next step for once we figure out where we want to first start planting trees, more trees, then we can work on that. I think that in my mind.
And Victor, that really, and Dana, that looks like part of number 6 here. Creating a systematic approach to determine where to plant trees would be greatly helped by having a map, a graphic.
A graphic, yeah.
Something.
So I don't know if that is a combination from Ben and Joe at Benchmark or
Well, I
or
think
actually yours is through the city system, right, Ben, is it?
What we've done with the inventory in the past is just make a shape file with the GIS and it overlays with what the city uses for like lot lines and the aerial maps. We could probably work on that. It's not the same format that Joe at Benchmark uses, and that's the thing. It's kind of hard for hyper accurate stuff where you're talking about, you know, very precise measurements. The engineers use different systems and different graphic representations. I
think for the purposes of communicating to the community and to council and any other groups and just even amongst ourselves, though, that would be really helpful to have something like that we can blow up and, you know, take to a meeting or whatever.
Yeah, and with GIS, that stuff can be, you know, I mean, if we're talking about a very large area like the city, it's not hard. I mean, it works well with large areas. If we're talking about areas that are, you know, several feet, it probably would not work very well at all. I think
this is a big picture kind of thing. I don't think it's critical that we know the exact location of every tree, but just generally where they are.
I think that's really helpful because that gets to my first question that I raised early on in the meeting, like, where are these trees? You know?
Right.
Yeah, that might help that too.
Yeah.
On to what Karen's saying, the one thing that I have to point out is that our city inventory only inventories trees that are in high traffic areas that are between the road and the sidewalk and areas that are parks. There are lots of areas that have trees that are owned or controlled by the city that are not on the inventory. And it might make more sense to have a better picture of what we have. Before we start worrying about changing it, we should have a better idea of what we actually are maintaining. I will point out that, you know, the numbers that we have in this recently adopted document indicate that we have 43% maple. And that's better than average for most cities. Like Petoskey's inventory just came up at 60% maple.
I saw that, yeah.
That's really, really bad. And the other thing is that their inventory indicates that they have softwood species maples, autumn blazes, Acer platanoides, the Norway maples. Those are highly attractive to things like Asian longleaf. But if we don't know how many trees we actually have, our numbers might be false. And the reason we started taking an inventory was because emerald ash borer was found in Michigan, and we wanted to know how many ash trees we had along the roads, or ash trees that would be affected that could fall on houses and or people. This is a much broader picture. Like if we're talking about systems management, we probably should have a better idea of what system we're looking at.
So I think there's two ways to approach this. One would be, Ben, what would it take to finish getting the rest of the street trees on a map? And then the other is, I have this feeling that probably Benchmark could also use GIS, get them on there, and then you could go back and say species, or I could go back and say species. So maybe before, I mean, we could just do sort of like a drive-by, we need more trees here, but maybe it is nice to have something a little more systematic or something.
What's an example of a tree that's not already been documented? Like, where are these other trees that you're talking about, Ben? Like, what's an example of that?
So we don't, so like your neighborhood, there's a road right of way between, the center line of the road, the control of property outside of the road extends into, the edges of lawns and things like that. Trees that are planted in those right of ways are owned by the city. Anything that is north of Lake Street, or in the neighborhoods between like Lake Street and the Bluff, those trees have never been inventoried. So it would be mostly the trees that are along Main Street and the downtown area that were inventoried, and then the parks around that. So, like Summit, Ann Street, Harrison Street, there are all sorts of trees that are included there where the lots are a little bit bigger and the trees are a little bit farther from houses that may be owned by the city that were not inventory.
And I put it up on the map here. I put a map up, and this is hard to see because they're light green, but this just gives you these green circles right here. It gives you an indication about where we've done most of our tree inventory, where most of the inventory has taken place. So yes, you can see them along Lake Street and then downtown area. But if you go in some of these, West 3rd Street, West 2nd Street, down to Glen Drive, these areas, and up Layton Park, we haven't done any of the inventory up there. So, and also, for example, Kiwanis Park, we have there, but we're not inventorying the entire forest. So those
I
are
wonder,
some examples.
Victor, would it be possible to talk to Joe and ask him how easy it would be to spot the trees on there, just so we have a graphic to work from? Doesn't have to be, super exact, but.
Let's see. Ben, how long do you think something like that would take with a GIS?
Well, I don't know what Joe's capacity is for using that technology. And I think when we've had, and I can't speak for Joe, this is my understanding of what he's told me when I asked a similar question, which is they don't use that system, and the system they use works for what they do. They could locate the trees, we could put names to them, but then we would have to, it may be difficult getting two different languages to speak. We can use all sorts of different inputs to GIS, and we can be hyper accurate. Like the machine we have is accurate to within inches, or we could be less accurate and use something like a cell phone and be accurate to within feet.
I think it would be nice that we've talked about having different layers of the city map. And this could be a layer that could be really helpful for a number of planning purposes, rather than continuing with a system that is not compatible.
I think we have.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Karen.
guys.
Yeah, I was just going to back up to what the point was that we were on when we started down this rabbit hole. It's not that it's irrelevant. That's not what I'm saying. It's a good discussion, but the goals, there we go, the goals.
As a
Part of-
basis, yes, as a basis for a street tree plan, which would then guide a systematic approach to
we
future
can-
plantings.
Yeah, and we can talk about whether the system that we use for doing that needs to have each tree digitized, or whether we can use just a visual overview where you can see the trees, or whatever. But that's a discussion for another day when we get on to achieving that goal.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Thanks, Sue. We're trying to establish the goals. Nancy, you had something to?
No, it can wait till you have that discussion later on. That's fine.
Okay,
Yep,
so
let's
far
say it's a goal.
I have what's on our list, well, and then some of the things we just talked about, as of course, what we were just talking about the inventory. Working on some of those education goals, so incorporating some public education and outreach into our goals for this year. Talking about a species to be avoided list, dealing with fixing or educating about tree bases at our trees at our parks. This figuring out the kind of funding we have for tree care and planting this year, and that incorporates taxpayer money as well as any donated money and other funds that we get. And the street tree plan graphic was kind of correlated with goal number 6 here. So what I'll do is I'll compile, was there anything else that anyone could think of?
The
Victor,
tree bases, Victor.
yeah, he had that one in his list. The first goal on there of obtaining Tree City USA certification, if I remember right, part of the reason that we needed to figure out the city's true cost to plant and maintain trees is because Tree City USA certification requires that you document that you spend a proportion of the city's budget each year on tree planting and maintenance. So a lot of these goals, and same thing with education, when we have to hold events in order to get that certification, a lot of these goals are really in service to that first item on there.
Okay, that makes sense. That's a good point.
For reference, it's $2 per capita for Tree City USA.
All right.
I
So
think
for us,
Victor said we spent 30,000.
we have what, 1,500 people, so like $3,000. I mean, it's not per capita of tree, is it, Ben?
Well,
Per capita.
probably our inventory is similar to our population, so it comes out to be the same. No,
Yeah.
I believe per person.
Okay. All right, so I think we've met that, but documenting it and showing how we've met that and getting our true costs. So that's a good point, Sue. So what I'll do is I'll compile this. If there's no other goals we can think of, we have a list about 10, 11 for this year, which I think is plenty healthy with the other normal requests we get for street tree plantings, et cetera. I'll formalize a list of goals, circulate that to everyone, and then make sure that any edits you can give to me, and then it'll just be a working document. We'll check off goals as we go. So
I don't mean to monopolize. I'm really sorry. I just had one more thing that has some urgency to it. And we, in the implementation matrix, there was an item 6.4.1 to create restrictions on clear cutting. So there was another instance over the winter of somebody clear cutting a private bluff on East Bluff. Let's see, is it in the block? I think it's in the block just east of State. So I just think that sooner than later, if we could, come up with a plan for how to deal with that type of thing.
All right.
Yeah, I just want to add something on number 3 goal, getting back to Dana's point about cost. I'm wondering if we might rephrase that a little bit, because we need to look at the total cost and then the city's portion of it. I think if it reads like it's up to the city to pay for all this, then there's going to be some pushback from some taxpayers. But if we,
Right.
we're trying to figure out what the whole cost is going to be to do all this, and then what part of it will the city take responsibility for, and then the rest are going to have to come from donations, grant monies, whatever.
Yep.
Yep, that's a good point. Thanks.
And I have just one more thing to bring up. And I don't know if this is the place to do it, but I did want to talk to the board about the downtown Main Street Streetscape project. We have had a big project underway, I guess, for probably a year now, to spiff up downtown, and we're looking at putting in iron tree grates and spacing the trees so it works out nicely aesthetically, and so that car doors opening aren't hitting trees. So that's going to involve removing all the trees, starting over, and there was a whole lot of history too. We were going to try and save them and heal them over, and Ben had concerns and Joe had concerns, and it looked like it was going to be more expensive. So anyways, it's a very expensive project, and I had told the DDA that I would talk with the tree board about whether there could be some consideration for some of our trees that we either currently or will have in our excess inventory to be used on that project.
Dana, is this part of the goals discussion, or do we want this under the next one about tree planting locations?
I wasn't sure. Yep. Okay. Let's defer it then.
No, I mean, it's a good point, and I think that's the next thing on our agenda.
Okay, sounds
Yes.
good.
If we're good with this, what I'll do is move on to item F4. Looks like we're, okay. Item F4 is planting sites. So the idea here is, as we kind of talked about earlier, is to start figuring out where we're going to plant trees in the town when we get requests, right? And I'm sorry, my camera keeps on going in and out. I don't know why. But so we've had in the next PDF over, you'll see we have all these street trees that have been donated in the past couple of years. And we have a column to the very right that shows have they been planted or not and where they have been planted. So as you can see, we have several street trees that have been donated that we just haven't planted yet. And we need to, for respect to the people and follow through for the people who have donated, we need to get those trees planted somewhere. But we also need to start, ourselves keeping track of where we're planting these trees and, systematically having the right approach to planting them and putting them in the right locations. On top of this, we also have, as you know, about $15,000 or so that we recovered from the settlement from when the school project cut down trees on city property. So we still have that money kind of in reserve for planting trees and maintaining trees and taking care of trees. So of course, I don't propose we go at all of those right now, the $15,000 plus this, but we do it. So my point is we have a lot of trees that need to be planted, that should be planted, and we should probably start talking about those locations. So my idea here was twofold, is we probably should want to start talking about in general where we want to see trees, and then at another meeting as part of the goal, talk about getting more specific locations. The one thing that I've been working on right now is taking over for the former chair, Mark Gilbert, coordinating the relief grant application. I talked to the coordinator there, and for those of you that are new, we have a couple $1,000s from that grant to plant trees. And we had narrowed it down essentially. We had first talked about Layton Park versus this park by City Hall where the spillway is. And when I was talking with Mark Gilbert, he had kind of settled on with the coordinators of the relief program doing out here by the spillway. We have a lot of green space here that we could have trees and spaces for trees. And so I talked to the relief grant coordinator, and she wants to do a site visit in sometime mid to late April. So I invited her to a tree board meeting, but she said she doesn't know if she'll be able to make it, but she definitely wants to come out to the site and see where we're talking about when it comes to planting trees. And I'll provide her with our landscaping plan, which has tree plantings proposed, which that project will likely take place in May. And she's hoping for early June planting of these relief grant money trees. So I just want to make sure everyone's okay again with that location here in front of City Hall, working its way along east up Main Street and perhaps in that green space area too. We can get more specific after she does a site visit, but that's one location where that relief grant money, those trees will go there. So now
Victor, are
we
you
have-
talking about the landscape plan from Beckett and Rader?
Yeah, so these trees aren't going to be part of that landscape plan that are already included. It'll be in addition to those trees that are already proposed.
I
So
just,
with that,
go
yep,
ahead.
go ahead.
Nope,
No,
nope,
Nancy,
go.
Nope, I'm done. I've talked too much.
No, I just, as you all, most of you well know, I'm not particularly tree savvy. I'm the representative from council, but over the last few years, it seems to me like two of the high priority sites for planting trees are somewhere around the spillway, obviously. I think that goes without saying, and also in the downtown area. You guys have been talking about that for a long time. So I'm wondering if it would make sense to take some of these donated trees. There's like, I think about 8 that haven't been planted, if I counted that graph right, as well as some of this $15,000, and at least get started on that. You know, I know it's an expensive project, but you've got some trees sitting there waiting to be planted. Can they be used downtown? I mean, why not start that project somehow?
Nancy, by
Because to me,
downtown,
the spillway and downtown seem to be the two areas that really we need to quit talking about it and get it done, actually.
So just one thought on the spillway though is maybe we should wait until the landscaping goes in. We just don't want to detract from that beautiful landscaping project by willy-nilly throwing some trees in.
No, and I don't think any place
Yeah.
willy-nilly they should be thrown in, but I think we need to look at what money we've got set aside for trees and trees we've got set aside to plant and maybe incorporate them somehow in those two
So,
areas.
yeah, let me just, can I respond really quickly?
Sure.
So Dana, to your thought about the spillway, the landscape plan has proposed future locations for trees that aren't included in this project that go up along M119 on the south side of the spillway. That we
Oh,
haven't-
gotcha. Yep.
So that
Yep.
was one idea. So to kind of soften that view going up forward, just 'cause we
Okay.
didn't have.
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable with that. Yep.
And Nancy, to your point, when you mean downtown, are you specifically talking about street trees? Are you talking about parks? Are you talking about Main Street, Third Street?
I'm talking
What-
about the Main Street where you guys have been talking about the grates and replacing all those trees and everything. Can we not use some of these donated trees to help alleviate some of the cost of that project?
I think this would be a good example of one board helping another board. I would love to see it happen. One of the problems with the parks right now is there's a lot of flux, and it's going to be, I think, much more well-defined very soon, right, Victor? But I'm afraid to put too many more trees in the parks before it's determined what the parks will be used for.
I'm thinking about downtown where you guys have been talking about putting
The
those
street
trees
tree project, yeah, so
here.
just some background, it's 35 trees, so it's a lot of money for
It's a
us
lot
to
of
come
money.
up with.
But if we have 8 of them or whatever in the donation and we've
That'd
got.
be a huge
we
help,
could
yeah.
Take care of a third of them that
Here's my
way. I would think there's no.
my suggestion. Let's wait. So let's keep downtown in mind, Main Street. Let's wait to see when the bids come back to council to see if council, first of all, if and how they approve that project, because council still has to select a bid. So I think maybe we can keep that in mind, that we want to focus on Main Street and maybe other areas in downtown. But where we put them on Main Street or downtown is going to be dependent on whether or not council approves the bids, because we don't know what the bids have come back yet as. The bids may still come back up as very expensive, and we might have to find ourselves back at the drawing board. I hope that's not the case. I really hope this project goes forward, but I don't want to jump the gun on saying let's plan on removing those trees on Main Street when that might not be the final decision yet. But if we focus on downtown, at least we have an idea that we want to, for this year, focus on here, the spillway area and downtown, and then we can figure out the precise locations after we get the results of that bid review process. Is that fair? Is there
Yep,
other
no, that
locations?
sounds like a good idea.
Can I make a quick comment here?
Of course, Ben.
A couple times we've been taken to task because we have a tendency to make a lot of our expenditures in parks and along Main Street, and we are missing the diversity of the city, and we have yet to spend any money in places like Layton Park or along 4th Street. And there have been some comments made about like equity and how we're doing this evenly throughout the city. It might be a good idea to use some of those granted trees to put in places that we have been silent on speaking about earlier.
That is a good point. I mean, that's something I have heard before. And in our survey results for the master plan we're kind of mixed on that. Some people wanted to see more trees in these other line areas. Others said, no, we don't. But maybe that we do have 3 categories then of maybe for the next meeting. We have 3 categories now. One is this spillway, which we're probably going to cover with the relief grant program. And then we have downtown Main Street trees. And then we have a 3rd location of specifically finding other areas throughout town where we might want to plant a few trees this year. And maybe we bring some thoughts to the next tree board meeting on March 9th. I believe it's March 9th. I think it's March 19th, but the next tree board meeting, and talk about, all right, each of you bring some of these locations which might have been missed or neglected by the city. So that way we can hit that as well. I think that's a good point, Ben.
And if I can add just a quick comment on that, Victor, when I was looking at places where we might want to plant trees, driving down Lake Road, a lot of Lake Road has neighborhood trees in yards that are really big and nothing in the parkway. So that's sort of another thing to watch for. And also places there where the trees that have been planted in the parkway in that area between the sidewalk and the street are too big, and they've had to get topped and mangled in order to fit under there. So there are some good opportunities along Lake Street to plant where we use the correct species that will get to be the correct size, and add some trees, because we can't just rely on private residents to maintain their trees forever, and trees don't live forever. Right, Ben?
Susan, what do you mean by
I think that's a good thought, Sue.
So what do you mean by the parkway exactly?
The parkway, I mean the strip of land between the sidewalk and the street.
All along Lake Street?
Yeah, along any street, the parkway refers to that, and people call it a lot of different things. Parkway is the habit I've fallen into, but yes, along parts of Lake Street where there is a parkway, if you look at where the trees are, it's generally not in that strip between the sidewalk and the street. So for later.
I think that would probably be in keeping with a possible street tree plan for the future too, where we look at our major corridors, that being one of them. And another one I'd like to throw in the hat is Ann Street. I think there are no street trees on Ann Street.
I agree.
And I think one thing that would help with the speed on Ann Street, which Kieran can testify to, is people just fly up and down Ann Street. And as we've said before, street trees can slow people down.
Mm-hmm. Good point,
those are good points. So I suggest that we bring these specific locations back to our next meeting. Well, we try to keep these meetings to an hour. I know we try to, and I want to try to stick to that as best as possible. But we bring these specific locations to our meeting next, and then we narrow it down to those ones that we want to focus on this year. And then by then we should know more about the Main Street, the tree base bid selection, and we'd have a better idea of where we're going. And so that's my proposal. And I'll just really quickly, Ben Vealing had some comments that he chatted instead of speaking up about. There's a DNR Urban and Community Forestry Grant we can apply for. It can cover education outreach. And so that's something we can look into. And he's referring to when Sue was talking about the parkway, also called the right-of-way sometimes. And the right-of-way includes the street, that grass, and the sidewalk. So good points, Ben. But so is everyone comfortable with coming back next time with more specific locations and then getting more details, Ben?
Victor, would we also want to share the trees to avoid document that I got started on, because that will then inform the trees for success, because we actually do have a couple trees on our list that are on some of these lists of trees to avoid.
Well, what I'll do is I'll take out of all these goals, I'll compile that list together. And then when Sue as a chair, when we get together to establish an agenda, we'll look at what the agenda looks like. And we'll see, if there's, based on what we've talked about now, what we're doing forward, what kind of room there is on the agenda to tackle what, and then maybe we can put that on the agenda for next time or whatnot. So we'll make it probably a call out depending on what Sue thinks there.
Gotcha. Yep.
Great,
That's all I have.
Great.
super.
Thanks. Good meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to have
So-
everyone here.
Sue, as you are the chair, you can slam down the gavel on the meeting.
We stand adjourned. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thanks. See you
Hey,
soon.
thanks, everyone.
Great,
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.